Let's go!
Hello and welcome to this edition of Fish Stripes Live, presented by La Pop. That's LAPOP. And as you can see, we do have a smaller show here today, but we still have just as many topics. I'm joined here today, as always, by Mr. Eli Sussman. We also have a press box report later coming up from Isaac Azout and Noah Berger. But our guest tonight from 5 Reasons Sports, he is a friend of Fish Stripes, Mr. Jonathan Anderson. Jonathan, how does it feel to come on?
It's good. It's good. You know, I just woke up from a nap, but we're ready to talk baseball at any point of the day, you know?
I just saw a tweet not that long ago that suggested that 4 p.m. was like the perfect time to take a nap, and that seems like you fell right into that window. So
That's what I've been the past week, so.
Yeah, I kind of inadvertently fall into naps sometimes, you know, when I'm actually able to, and I totally agree with that. Sign on with that for sure. Yeah. So this is I'm excited. This is for people that don't know, I'm coming down to Florida right at this time tomorrow. So I'm excited to get some takes out of my system, and then getting a whole bunch of new intel and experiences while I'm down there. Hoping to see as many of you as possible during that visit.
And with that, I think probably the first topic to discuss, some news that broke out from Ken Roventhal just a few days ago that the Marlins are still talking to first baseman Yuli Gurriel, but no longer a major league deal. Now it's likely to be a minor league deal to bring in the former batting champ and 39-year-old first baseman. Jonathan, I want to hear your thoughts on maybe what the Marlins could be looking at with Yuli Gurriel, and especially it being a minor league deal compared to the money he was looking for earlier this offseason.
Yeah, the entire offseason that we've been, you know, linked to Yuli Gurriel, and especially when it came into light that, you know, he kind of ghosted us a little bit, so we've kind of backed off the tracks. I've known and realized that he was really overplaying his market. You know, he was looking for like a $4, $5, $6 million deal. We weren't willing to go over like 2 or 3. And now we get to this point where we're a couple weeks into spring training, and he's still not done. But you get the Marlins roster, and right now we have Garrett Cooper as the only true first baseman on our roster. You have Jordan Groshans, who's being, you know, converted to a first baseman. You have Gerard Encarnacion, who's also being converted into a first baseman. But you have no real true first baseman behind, aside from, you know, Troy Johnston out in AAA, who has minimal experience down there. So getting somebody like you, especially on a minor league deal, who comes in with that leadership mentality, the winning mentality coming from Houston, and being a true first baseman, I think is a great addition to the team. Whatever that deal is, that really depends. If it's a minor league deal, I'll take it.
You touched on it. They're in this weird spot where they do have a lot of internal first base options, but they're all bad options. They're all guys that defensively, they don't really know what they're doing at that position. And offensively, you have some questions. I think the timing of this rumor coming out, not so coincidentally, it's on the heels of the first round of spring training cuts. We love Troy Johnston. We really do. We believe in the hitting instincts. But his small sample of spring training was so bad that this coming on the aftermath of that, him being a guy that entering spring you could see as like a first base reinforcement at some point during the year, you have to wonder whether or not, based on their impressions, not only of him, but also of those several other guys that you just touched on, that maybe that's the impetus for them saying that, hey, Yuli, we want to try to work this out one way or the other, because Yuli's upside is pretty terrific. You just look at 2021, he's even been better than that earlier in his career, but just the realistic upside is still pretty good with this guy if he simply has a, you know, traditional bounce back compared to what he was in 2022. There is a lot of risk here. A player like this, frankly, I mean, I don't like to be too judgmental about age alone. It's just that the facts are the facts. When a player reaches so deep into their 30s, it's so rare for them to give you anything except for occasional DH help. Usually that is a time in your career, if it hasn't already, where the defense totally disappears from the profile and obviously the speed as well. So the downside is pretty obvious. It's just that they can get him on a non-guaranteed deal. If they can make it so that he at least needs to show something in camp, in extended spring training, behind the scenes, that he has to prove a little bit that he has something left in the tank before they even guarantee him any money, I think that would be a total no-brainer for someone with his resume.
Yeah, and with that, maybe what does it tell you that the Marlins are now resorting to just, you mentioned a 39-year-old first baseman this far into spring training on a minor league deal? What does that tell you about the future of maybe that position for the Marlins, maybe how they are long term, where they really don't have anything? You mentioned Troy Johnston. There are talks, maybe Jacob Berry potentially, who knows, future long term. But what is this? Does this say more about the position for the Marlins in their system, where they have to go to their best option is a 39-year-old?
Well, they're in this interesting spot where they have made this statement that they want to take a significant step forward this year. They want to win more major league games this year. They're taking potentially one more step to doing so by bringing in somebody that has at least been there, done that at the major league level. I don't think it necessarily means anything beyond this year, but it is very possible that they are totally back to the drawing board at this time next year, because Garrett Cooper is going to be a pending free agent. That's going to be a fascinating negotiation depending on how this year goes, how healthy he stays, how much power he hits for. Like, it's not outside the realm of possibility that they somehow bring back Cooper beyond that. It's just that I think you'd have to bet on them going in a different direction, unless one of these many internal options prove to be the kind of a solid answer there, or at least they can makeshift some sort of platoon out of their internal options. Then it is very possible that they are going to be dipping back into free agency for somebody that is more in their prime, for somebody that can be trusted a little bit more than Yuli. But that no doubt, it is a vulnerable position in the organization. It's just, thankfully, that is a position that is usually easiest and least expensive to find new solutions for. So it's not necessarily the sky is falling. It's certainly a different conversation than we have with center field or with shortstop. This is one where it doesn't take a whole lot of luck or a whole lot of money to solidify that position if you're really in need of starting over.
Yeah, I want to ask also, Jonathan, with first base, are there any other options that really intrigue you? You mentioned Troy, but that really hasn't worked out. You talked Jordan Groshans, Gerard. Is there maybe a singular name which you would look at, maybe the Marlins should have there as a backup first baseman to Coop?
I mean, generally not necessarily. I mean, the only other option that I named that we haven't brought up is our former Rule 5 minor league draft pick of Charles LeBlanc. He played last year, had pretty good offensive season. Obviously, he's not the 40-man right now. But I think the biggest argument with LeBlanc is that his weakness last year was his arm across the diamond from shortstop or from third base. I can't remember if he played much first base last year, but, you can pop him over there. If his bat plays how it did last year, good. If not, it's no big deal. As Eli was saying, there's not much for the Marlins on first base post this year, but it's not a hard hole to fix. You mentioned Jacob Berry. Obviously, they're trying to put him at third base. More than likely, he'll end up at first base or DH, in my personal opinion. But outside of that, Johnson's there, but Johnson's 25 years old in his first season in AAA. So there's not much options out at first base in the organization. So I think this is a good move. I hate to call it a win now move, but it's a win now move in the sense of solidifying your roster and plugging any minor holes that are there.
Yeah, if Yuli does come to the Marlins, do you guys think he can potentially, I don't want to say repeat that how he did a couple years ago, but do you think we'll get more maybe that Yuli or more of last year's Yuli where he's already on the decline? Do you think the Marlins could be able to fix him at all?
Well, I'll see if I can find this recent Fangraphs article about it, which is titled "The Outlook Isn't So Good for Yuli Gurriel."
Oh, no.
And it goes into detail about all the things, a part of his game that are not aging particularly well. Yeah, I'll take a screenshot right here for people to see part of this. It was a pretty brief article. It just boils down to the fact that he is a fly ball hitter, and he's no longer has the same power that he used to. So a lot of those fly balls that used to be hard line drives for extra base hits or even occasional home runs, those have kind of dried up, as I'll be able to get on this on the screen in a minute, that the measurables are pretty obvious from both the eye test, but also from StatCast as well, backing it up, that his average exit velocity on fly balls is down a couple miles an hour from what it used to be. He's still hitting ground balls hard, but that doesn't really help you much at all. And his overall hard hit rate on those fly balls, it's almost cut in half from where it was all other years of his career prior to last year. That's something where it's not really a safe bet to assume you can regain that at a certain age when you're obviously not going to be putting on any additional strength and your bat speed is only going to continue to decline at this point. So the outlook is not great. He'd have to become a different type of hitter in some respects, I think, to keep it going. It's that there's a reason why he has not gotten a guaranteed major league deal, although reporting the Miami Herald has been on this, that the Marlins apparently did make him a guaranteed offer early in the offseason for a couple $1 million. They seem to be the only team that was desperate enough, enthusiastic enough about his bounce back potential to do it. He's this is who he is. This is the type of player where he's in the same mold as, for Marlins fans, Curtis Granderson in 2019. Same mold as, let me think of some other guys that were in that same vein. I guess, not quite Cameron Maybin. He's certainly further along age-wise than Maybin was, but you could just pick any of those random one-year players deep into their career, post-peak, saying what you have. And the best-case scenario is that they're like an above-average role player.
Rafael Trujillo is one, right?
I'm trying to come up with more recent ones. Oh, well, you know, like on the positive side, Adam Duvall would be like on the positive end of that, where they kind of bought low on him. But that's a very different type of profile where the power was never in doubt. And let me just think about like this past year coming to, Matt Joyce. That is probably the best comp of all, going back just a few years, where they were just hoping for him to be a platoon player. He it was such a small sample because of COVID. He was all right, all things considered. Matt Joyce is kind of the exact type of thing you're looking for, the same category, where he's just to fill out the roster a little bit, not your desired option, just a stopgap until hopefully one of your other internal options really break out.
Yeah. Internally, I kind of feel like it's maybe a little difficult for the Marlins there, first base, like John mentioned about maybe Jordan Groshans looking there, Charles LeBlanc. Hopefully, I don't know if they want to even move Jacob Berry over there, but that's a conversation for another day there. So I wanted to go ahead and move on from first base, Julie, and talk about the World Baseball Classic starting, I believe, last night. First game, Cuba, Netherlands. Panama won today, 12-2. We're going to have some more games later tonight. And, of course, they are coming to Miami this weekend. John, how are you feeling about the World Baseball Classic? Enthusiastic? Who's your team? Players you're looking at? Give us a little rundown so far for the WBC and what to expect.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think it's honestly one of the coolest things in sports. Obviously, there's the World Cup, and that's really not compared. This is the closest thing we have, in any other major sport. We don't really have anything, but it's fun. The one thing that I was interested in, and I'll go into more in depth as to what my thoughts are, what my predictions are, and all that. But this is a general question to you guys. Do you guys know for the exhibitions going on right now? Because I haven't been able to watch it. Are they utilizing the pitch clock when they face MLB teams or no? Because I know the World Baseball Classic's not using the pitch clock.
Right. In these exhibitions, they fall under the World Baseball Classic purview.
Okay.
So none of the new rules into effect during this game. Unfortunately, we're not going to get our live press box report that we wanted because the talented PA announcer is doing his job and drowning out the noise that Noah Berger and Isaac Azut are trying to get through to us. So we're not going to have that live press box report, but there is this game coming up in just 25 minutes. And because they're not incorporating the new rules, this could prove to be the longest Marlins spring training game, maybe the longest Marlins game of the year overall, but definitely in spring training because there will be no pitch clock. Israel is going to use 9 different pitchers in
Man.
maybe 8 different pitchers if the game only gets to the 8th inning before the Marlins take over. A lot of pitching changes, potentially a lot of runs scored, and no pitch clock. That is an impression that I got just from watching these first couple WBC games. It's very quickly we have, as our correspondent is going to try to check in from the press box.
Let's see.
We'll try to get to him in a moment. But I think you're going to notice the difference after being spoiled these last couple of weeks with the pitch clock. Going back is it's a big jarring difference to all of a sudden have all this mostly wasted time in between individual pitches. Yeah.
I believe the Panama game earlier today was 4 hours and 1 minute. So,
oh my gosh.
As we're joined by Noah here in the press box for Israel versus the Marlins. Noah,
So I'm not in the press box. The PA is too loud in there. But I just had to check in. I'm having the time of my life. This is my Super Bowl. Worlds colliding. I've gotten to catch up with some guys that knew me back when I was 7, when my father was the president of the Israel Baseball League. They're all like, "Oh my God," they cannot believe that I am 23. So it's kind of a cool moment for me. There's apparently going to be a couple schools doing the national anthems. There's a lot of blue in the crowd too, both for the Marlins and for Israel. The Israel uniforms, of course, look amazing. And yeah, I'm just excited for this.
how are the former Marlins players, current Marlins players?
Jake Fishman sends his regards. And yeah, everyone's great. Everyone looks awesome. Jock Peterson's not going to be here, not going to be with the team with Israel until Saturday, I think. So he's the only one that's not here. And Garrett Stubbs is playing third.
How does the lineup look for Israel, Noah?
It looks like a lineup. That's all I got.
Yeah,
You
we'll
got
throw it
Garrett
up on
Stubbs playing third. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, let's see if we could throw it on the screen for just a
Yeah,
second.
now I do have to go back. I gotta go.
All right, quickly, Noah, World WBC prediction. Who wins it all?
Not Israel. I think Dominican Republic.
Perfect.
All right, gotta go. Bye.
Go enjoy yourself.
Just a moment after I tease it out on Twitter that we have a press box report, it's over. So sorry to everybody for the false advertising right there.
I do want to see those lineups. I would like to see.
Yes, let's do that as we get into this. So it's just a one-off exhibition game at Roger Dean between Israel and the Marlins. This is what we got, where for the Marlins perspective, pretty close to full strength with the exception of the WBC guys that they're missing with Arise and Segura. Just about everybody other spots. And at the very bottom, they get Groshans in because of those guys' absences. Otherwise, Birdie leading off, Jazz again playing center field. We have Avi being the DH for this one. And Soler in right field, a position that he didn't even play at all last year. From Israel, do you guys recognize? Well, obviously, the leadoff guy, you certainly recognize Garrett Stubbs, hitting a walk-off home run against the Marlins last year. Ryan Lavarnway, former Marlins major leaguer himself. Anybody else stick out to you in that Israel lineup that you're familiar with?
Zach Giloff is, I believe, the 3rd ranked prospect in the A's organization. So if you like prospects, you like guys to look at for the future, I think that's probably like maybe their best, one of their upcoming best players. I think that's someone to really look at there that I really recognize. Obviously, Ryan Lavarnway, Alex Dickerson, Danny Valencia, who hasn't played in the major leagues in a couple of years. But I would say, looking at it, it's probably not going to win a game, maybe a game, but it's definitely a lineup. I don't know, like Noah said, I would say it's a lineup for sure.
I will say Kelly had retired already. He used to play for the Mets for 6 years. I remember him for sure.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see Matt. He's one of my favorite first base prospects in the league.
Yeah.
Currently getting disrespected out in Chicago with Hosmer and who else? The other player. There's Mancini signed out there with Mervis knocking at the door. But he's a killer first baseman. So I'm excited to watch him play tonight. And then Valencia was one of my all-time favorite pinch hit players on MLB The Show or MLB 2K growing up. So good to see him back.
Yeah. Those guys, 2 or 3, are probably the guys that people should keep an eye on in terms of prospects. And in guys as foundation pieces. Actually, Left mentioned the third ranked. He has like I believe 60 run for the Athletics. Probably going to be their shortstop, second baseman of the future there. But Ryan Lavarnway playing cleanup. That's something I didn't have in my bingo card for 2023.
He is still, as Noah mentions, actually Alex Carver mentioned this, that he is still indeed a free agent. So it's a little unclear what he's doing after this at this stage of his career. This could be it for LaVarnway. We'll see if it is. He's a very good personality, and he's somebody that whether it's in a front office or on a coaching staff, like I would not be surprised whatsoever if he still has a job in baseball after his playing career, whenever it ends. Who's missing is Jock Peterson, but he will be joining the team once the real games begin this weekend. I think Team Israel mentioned that. Aside from him, the other story that Noah brought up to us before is that if they had 100% Jewish participation from the major leaguers, then it could be a pretty decent team. But guys like Alex Bregman declined to do it.
Harrison
I'm trying to
Bader.
think of anybody else I don't think anybody else is quite on the Bregman tier.
Yeah.
I think despite his last name, Paul Goldschmidt, I don't think he's Jewish despite the last name. And he's playing for US.
Wasn't Bader injured or something, I believe?
Bader's another one. That would be a big help to them instead of sorry to Jacob Goldfarb.
We have to click on these names. I have to see these people, see if they have actual stats or something. But I think the pitching is also kind of a strength for them too. I do like their pitching. Obviously, they do have minor help there with Richard Blyer, Jake Fishman. They also have some more prospects there. I'm just looking at it right now over, but obviously, probably their number one guy is Dean Kremer.
Let me put up silly me. I have an infographic from the master of all this, Sean Spradling, the one who's been providing. He has been the big winner of WBC coverage so far this year with all the work that he's doing, putting this in an easily digestible way. So you can see the whole roster there on the left side and the projected lineup that they're using. So the projected lineup they're using tonight is pretty similar to what they're using in the actual tournament, with the exception of Jock missing. Mm-hmm. And the starting rotation is vulnerable. I don't think it inspires a whole lot of confidence that Blyer is slided in to be their closer. That's not a typical role for him. And once again, in the corner, that is Sean Spradling. His Twitter account has blown up, given all the way that he's covering all, not just Israel and not just US, but all 20 teams as thoroughly as possible. And on the coaching staff, they're managed by Ian Kinsler, who one of the better Jewish playing careers in recent memory, with a pretty stacked coaching staff as well, with Brad Osmus and Kevin Euclid as the coach. Wow. Yeah, it is. It's a good, and I think Tiger Peterson. Me and Noah were talking about this. He is Jock's brother. He's his older brother, who also had a brief minor league playing career. And they have a really interesting prospect, Jacob Steinmetz.
Yep, I was about to mention him.
Yeah, who is Orthodox, and he's trying to become the kind of unprecedented in being an actual Orthodox Jew trying to reach the major leagues eventually. He's just getting started with his pro career, but was very highly regarded prospect coming out of high school, and I believe he's in the D-backs organization. Yeah. So he's somebody not to watch in this tournament so much, but certainly between now and maybe the next WBC, maybe he makes it up to the big leagues by then. He has that kind of talent.
Yeah, just looking at everything. Evan Kravitz, I believe you have Colton Gordon, who's a top 30 guy for the Astros there. So it's really a lot of prospects, guys who are still very young in their careers for sure, pitching wise, and then obviously with all their position players, it's mostly guys whose peak has gone, or some who are still looking for their peak.
Yeah,
but it's definitely an interesting team. The pool they're in is definitely does not do them any favors, but it should be at least fun to watch Israel for sure.
Yeah, we have breaking news from Christina Di Nicola confirming that Dean Kramer is going to be their starter on Sunday for their first game in pool play. I will be there for that one. That is the one day that I'm going down to see WBC games. So That is against Nicaragua? So
Yeah.
maybe that's their one winnable game, perhaps.
It'll be probably Erasmo Ramirez versus Dean Kremer.
Yeah. Well, we can take a break here and then come up on the other side talking more WBC and Marlins spring training stuff. Stick with us.
Welcome back. Now we're going to continue our coverage or talking more about the WBC. So with this, I was thinking, if you guys are up for it, do you guys want to go maybe pool by pool, give our thoughts on these, not each team, but just how they look and discuss teams, maybe players that really stick out to everyone in these different pools?
Yeah, let me pull up so that everybody's on the same page. If I can get a graphic of all four of the pools. The one that got underway first was one out in Taiwan. Between the first game that was played last night was the Netherlands and Cuba.
Yeah.
And I lost some money on that because I blindly bet on Cuba to win.
Hey, it looked like Twitter was blowing up with Cuba's starter, Yadiel Rodriguez, who I believe had 6 strikeouts, punched out, or got Xander Bogaerts looking. So that's definitely a guy I think major league teams will definitely keep their eye on for at least the next year or so. So I believe still 24 was I believe reliever of the year in Japan. So that's definitely someone that should bring in a lot of interest for MLB teams. He should probably make a lot of money after this WBC.
Yeah, let me pull that up right now for everybody to see. There we go. So our 4 pools, that was Pool A that started off last night. And then, I think both pools A and B are going on. Let me take a closer look at the schedule. But all those, obviously, understandably, those teams got a head start because of the time zone difference, where the winners of those pools and also the second place in those pools that advance to the next rounds for the quarterfinals, then everybody's coming. Oh, I'm sorry, they're going to Japan, but then in the semifinals, they need to come all the way to Miami, and there needs to be a recovery time in between. So that's why they're getting a head start, so that once they're progressed to the stage where they come all the way to the U.S., they have a little time in between to rest up and stay on an even playing field. But there was that big controversy, not a controversy, but the talking point from the Netherlands-Cuba game was the one Cuban fan with his horn, what you call it? His whatever instrument it was. And the backstory apparently is that he is a super fan, that in all the international Cuban tournaments, he travels to see the team in person, to root them on, and he always brings that instrument with him. And that's his thing. That's I guess whatever it is that brings you satisfaction and feels that you have a role to play in the team. I'm all for it. I'm all for it. People are just freaking out because he's set up right as close as possible to the TV microphone, so it made it sounds probably even more disruptive than it actually was in person.
Yeah, and if you're watching the game, I believe I tapped out in the 3rd inning, because that first inning felt like it took like I believe half an hour or at least 40 minutes, just that first inning. So I have to tell you a little bit in terms of pace per play, pitch clock and everything there. But Netherlands does look like a team to watch out for. They have really great defensively with Xander Bogaerts, Antoine Simmons, and that should be a really fun team to look at. And probably the favorites for Pool A as well.
What is your enthusiasm level, Jonathan, for the WBC on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think I was at a 9 about 2 or 3 weeks ago, but as we've gotten close and there's been a lot of dropouts, it's kind of dropped down to like around a 7. Yeah. But I'm so excited. As I said earlier, this is like the equivalent of the World Cup for baseball. Mainly what I'm excited about is watching Japan, just because they have so many talented players out there. Like Murakami over at third. They have Yamamoto pitching. They have Roki pitching,
Lars Nootbaar.
yes, the legend. But all those players who in a few years will be in the majors, you get to see a sneak preview of them now. And so, especially someone like Murakami, who hit 56 homers at the age of 21 last year at third base, I'm really psyched to see him pitch or see him hit.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be fun because I believe Ohtani is not even he's not starting, or he's not
he's the number 2 pitcher.
Yeah, he's like their third pitcher there. So that should really tell you the depth that Japan has, where the MVP a few years ago is just their third starter. But
I mean,
no, go ahead.
I don't know if you know too much about Roki. I think it's Sasaki's his last name. But last season he pitched a perfect game with 19 strikeouts. Then the next game he pitched, he threw 8 perfect innings with I think 16 strikeouts, and then his manager took him out, like back to back at age 21. Insane.
I think that's a fun part of the WBC, where you see players you don't really know of, and MLB teams are able to look at them really maybe for the first time in terms of competition and where they're at, and really able to get really good looks of it. Because I believe there have been, I'm trying to think of players that came from the WBC. I think Aroldis Chapman was one from Cuba who after showing out in WBC got a contract there. So there is a list of players. I'm trying to look for that, but
the original sensation was Daisuke when he pitched for Japan the year before. The Red Sox gave him a gajillion dollars, and Japan is, for people that don't know, aren't fully up to speed on their history, Japan has won this twice. They're the one country that has multiple WBC titles. And then there's one for the U.S. and one for the DR. And so this will be the 5th one. And those 3 countries are arguably the 3 favorites, co-favorites. I guess we could go into, I know Daniel mentioned behind the scenes, he wanted to break down a couple of these other big teams. And the DR is one that with some recent dropouts, it's jarring. Like, obviously it's led by Sandy at the top of their rotation, and even the rest of the way, a lot of familiar names. They won the whole thing back in 2013, and let me take a closer look at their projected lineup. Also from the Marlins, Gene Segura is there, Johnny Cueto is there. Cueto is going to get a chance to start some games. We'll see what Segura does, just because their infield depth in particular is so insanely deep. Like, it's hard to imagine him making more than a couple starts over the course of the whole tournament.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's just not as good. He's not as good as Jeremy Pena or Wander Franco or Rafael Devers or Manny Machado.
It's insane.
And that's no knock on him. That's just the reality that this team is incredible, especially on the lineup. And then, of course, at the top of the rotation. And even in the bullpen, a lot of fireballers in there, including some old friends, Jimmy Garcia.
Yay!
We
Hector
have, it's an amazing team, and this is one of the many countries that takes this very seriously. They take a lot of pride in potentially winning this whole thing. It's not actually shown on here, but yet another part of this coaching staff. Oh, it is shown here on the coaching staff. Wellington Cepeda. I'm not sure if the casual Marlins fan is familiar with him, but he is the Marlins bullpen coach, and he has been the last 3 years. Along with Mel, he was retained under Skip's staff. He is extremely highly regarded by these guys, and so he's going to be part of this journey as well, just along with all the players.
Yeah, I will say that's an insane throwback at first base coaching with Julio Bourbon there. Man,
Robinson Cano, let's get some Robbie action. We have 2 at-bats in the entire WBC.
There was a WBC. Yeah, he's the captain in addition to sticking onto the roster. They had an exhibition today against the Braves. A crazy stat line because a lot of the starters only were in there one time through the order. So Gene Segura came off the bench and had 3 hits off the bench as a pinch hitter in their exhibition today against the Braves. And that would be pretty incredible, except for Ketel Marte did the exact same thing. He came in second time through the lineup. He went 3 for 3, and they blew out the Braves 9-0 today.
I thought Nelson Cruz had a home run.
They were piling it on. I mean, Nelson Cruz, he's in this weird position where he is the general manager of the team as well. I think he took that post when he wasn't entirely sure whether he would get a major league contract for this year. And now he is about as busy as anybody during the course of this tournament as both the GM and probably, I'm sure he's going to get himself into the lineup at some point during this tournament as well.
Definitely. He's going to be starting opening day for the WBC. But that's just an insane team. Julio, Juan Soto, Teoscar. It's just really crazy to see that.
Are we just going to skip over Jeimer Candelario, the star of the team?
That is a position where they look like they're pretty weak at. And then you have Gary Sanchez, who still has yet to sign anywhere as a starting catcher.
Yeah, Candelario was the injury replacement for Vladdy, and they're saying that Vladdy is available to play in the later rounds. He's only eligible to join if it's another injured player that he's replacing. We'll see how that goes. So that's just a reminder, as much as we want to focus on the baseball part of it, one reason for anxiety about this, one reason why there's some baseball fans that don't like the WBC is because inevitably there are going to be injuries. There are going to be players playing this non-major league sanctioned game that get hurt and are not going to be available for their teams during the regular season when they actually make their money and what they're actually paid to do and what these fans are ordinarily rooting for them to do. That's just probably going to be the reality of it. You hope for as few injuries as possible, but that's the way that this works, especially when you're playing at full intensity, when you're competing with so much on the line on a personal level and going at max effort. That's going to be part of it. What do you guys think about that element of it? That there are major league fans, obviously fans of particular major league teams, that are kind of have mixed feelings about this because of the injury risk and what that could potentially mean for their team during the actual regular season coming up.
Yeah, I think you could see injuries. I mean, almost anywhere. Injuries are about to happen. Look at the Dodgers. Look at Gavin Lux, who tore his ACL just in spring training. I think this also. If you have Sandy out there, people might say, "Oh, what if injury happens to Sandy?" Playing. But I think you're going to have to do that. This is what the players want to do. They want to play in this. They want to. They want to help their country and do everything for that. And if you want to grow baseball, if you want to make baseball, a bigger sport than what it is globally, you're going to have to put out your best players to these competitions. You're going to have to put Sandy, Johnny Cueto, Juan Soto, Manny Machado, all these top tier players out there to help grow the game and get the best out there for the sport of baseball. It's not like they're going to go out there and get injured immediately or anything like that. Injuries could happen, but I'm not the proponent where they're going to get injured or anything like that. It's really going to be a scare. It's probably just a really slim chance that they might even get injured. Knock on wood there. But I believe, when you have a player like that, you're going to have the best for them. And I can understand if you're paying $300 million like at Xander Bogaerts in the Netherlands, what happens if he gets injured there and misses a year? That's already money down the drain there for the Padres. But I feel like that's a risk you're willing to take. You're going to have to talk to the coaches there, the managers, make sure you don't want your player playing in so many games like that. Like I believe for pitchers, they have their days of rest where they get 3 days of rest for, I believe, 50 pitches. I believe in each pitcher, I believe is only allowed to play just 5 innings, I believe 6 innings. Something like that, but I believe with injuries, you're going to just have to play. You don't go into it thinking that someone's going to get injured.
Yeah, I think for the big thing for me is especially coming from a pitcher standpoint to where like starting pitchers aren't going to get a full game of run like they do in the regular season. The injury risk with the WBC is almost equivalent to the injury risk of spring training, and you could argue the fact that this is better for the players in spring training because it's a more competitive environment in spring training to where it's like, let me tweak on some things. Let me try holding the bat this way, or let me try my wind up this way, or whatever it may be, doing different tweaks. This is a more competitive environment, getting them ready for the regular season at a better rate. So I don't see a big issue with it. I obviously understand, but like they can get injured at any point. There's players that have gotten injured from, I don't remember who it was, but somebody got injured from putting on their pants one time. Pitcher got injured from playing too much Guitar Hero. So like you can get injured at any point. So I don't see too big of an issue with an injury risk here. I more see it as a welcome season for them, bit of nature.
Yeah, I meant to put this up earlier. There's Sandy, Cueto, and Gene Segura right there. Because in case it wasn't perfectly clear, in Pool D, these guys are opening up in Miami. They're going to be playing every single WBC game that the DR is alive for is going to be in their usual home ballpark. That is an interesting wrinkle in all of this. We've talked about this before early in the offseason that I don't think it's a coincidence that the Marlins, they approved the guys that had a pool in Lone Depot Park to participate, but all the players that would have had to travel for their WBC pool, including Jazz with Great Britain, a couple other less prominent players, Charles LeBlanc in Canada is another example.
Ian Lewis.
Ian Lewis, the same as Jazz with Great Britain. All the players that would have had pool plays outside of Miami, they got shut down. And that's ultimately the team's decision to do that. I don't think it was a total coincidence that if you're going to have your guys playing in this, you want them to be as close as possible to the actual staff, whether it's the trainers, whether it's simply the coaches or their teammates. They want to keep close tabs on these guys, just knowing how close we are. We're just 3 weeks away from the actual start of the regular season. So that is that's the Marlins are kind of fortunate in that regard, the way that this all lined up, that they're able to have players represent their countries, raise the profile of the organization in the process, and also keeping them in as close to home and as comfortable as possible.
Yeah. And to go from there, I think maybe another team we just have to mention, obviously the United States, USA, just another powerhouse. Last year's, but last WBC's winner in 2017. They had former Marlins Giancarlo Stanton and Christian Yelich, and again, they have probably the best team on the WBC, comparable to the Dominican Republic, captained by the one and only Mike Trout. You have guys like Kyle Tucker, you have Nolan Arenado, you have the MVP Paul Goldschmidt, former Marlin JT Realmuto. And I probably the biggest point on this team that maybe might scare some people into picking them is, I would probably say, the rotation. It's not, when you look at it, it's led off by Adam Wainwright, who, again, one of the best pitchers in baseball over the last decade, but it is getting there in age. You have Brady Singer as your second, Miles Michaelis, who, looking at it, is probably the best pitcher on that rotation. And then you also have Merrill Kelly, who had a strong year last season. But I believe probably starting rotation might be the biggest weakness for this team when looking at it. How do you guys feel about USA and their chances?
Well, what sticks out is how many St. Louis Cardinals are leading this roster. You mentioned Wainwright and Michaelis as well in the number 3 starter. On the position player side, having Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado, I think there might be even more if I look carefully enough in the bullpen. Who do they have in there? This lists Wainwright in both the rotation and that has them in as among their pitchers. Yeah, I think beyond that, I just want to mention that the Cardinals overall, if you include all the countries, they have more of their players in this tournament than any other major league team. So they're going to go a long way towards deciding it one way or the other. It is that rotation that just jumps out as not having the same star power as the lineup and as the bullpen. Mm-hmm. So Kyle Freeland seems to be either him or Lance Lynn. They would kind of be the emergency starter. More so Lance Lynn, I think, if he's fully healthy. Like maybe he gets a start at some point during this tournament. But other than that, let me just scroll up a little bit. Well, actually, you can see right here on the position player side. I mean, who's the weakest link of the projected starting position players? It might be Jeff McNeil, either him or Kyle Tucker. That's like the weakest link. Those guys would be the best position players on the Marlins, and they are they're probably the weakest projected starter in here. It's amazing. So they should score a gazillion runs. They later tonight they're playing their first exhibition game against the Giants out in Arizona. We'll see how many runs they put up over there. I'm sure they'll do the same thing that DR did, where the starters only go once, maybe twice through the lineup before the backups come in. And the backups in this case being like Tim Anderson and Bobby Witt Jr., Pete Alonso,
Kyle Schwarber,
Cedric
Mullins. Oh my God, this is
So they did a really good job with this. You got to shout out Mark DeRosa, who has been somebody through the years where we've posited that he'd be a very interesting Marlins managerial candidate. Instead of joining a major league team at this point, he gets this gig, and it seemed that his presence on the club was pretty well received by the players. A lot of guys want to play for him, given what he's shown as a broadcaster through the years and how he understands the game and kind of enthusiasm that he brings. This is an extremely, not only talented, but just an extremely fun team to root for. So it would not be surprising at all if they do pull off the repeat here.
Yeah, and look at that coaching staff too. How many All-Star appearances are in that coaching staff alone? Brian McCann, Ken Griffey Jr., Andy Pettit, just an insane coaching staff along with Mark DeRosa, and that can really help out this team for sure when you have, guys like that at every coaching position there.
Yeah. And just an update for people watching, the game is underway between Israel and the Marlins. And who got a double? Zach Galoff, who shouted out earlier.
Told you, he's going to be nice. That's a guy to watch out for.
Yeah.
I think if do you guys want to do one more team? Are you guys up for maybe Venezuela, Puerto Rico? Which of those teams do you think maybe have the biggest chance, or maybe we could talk about a little bit?
Well, I had Puerto Rico already loaded up, so I'll put it there. They do have a Marlins player in there, in Anthony Maldonado, in their bullpen. Aside from that, it's pretty loaded, just like these other teams as well. Offensively is where you see some holes for sure.
Yeah.
Where once you get past Lindor, the lineup is pretty iffy. The rotation can be pretty good depending on if Jose Barrios bounces back from the weird year that he had last season. And the bullpen is what really sticks out. They have the brothers of Alexis Diaz and Edwin Diaz in the later innings. So as much as I'd like to see Maldonado get some important innings, I think he's pretty deep on the depth chart behind certainly the Diaz brothers, Jorge Lopez, who was extremely good for the Orioles for most of last season. And even Giovanni Moran, he had some bright spots with the Twins last year.
Eric Rodriguez, I believe. It's another stack there. But I do feel like also, like you mentioned, the position players are where it's going to be probably the toughest, or maybe I don't want to say weakest, but especially for Puerto Rico. When you get to like that 6, 7, 8, 9 range, it's where it really falls off there.
Yeah, I can't really tell you anything about Neftali Soto. I don't know who that is, and he's penciled in to get some significant playing time for them. So it is in the corner infield spots. Those look to be the thinnest parts of this roster as well.
Wasn't MJ Melendez a catcher?
He's a catcher and outfielder for the Royals.
Yeah, this is a topic for maybe next episode of Fishology, because Baseball Savant came out with a new ranking of catcher blocking on a different level, showing individual pitches and the areas that catchers do a good job blocking. I bring that up because MJ Melendez was not only dead last in that category, but there was like 50 feet of crap between him and the next worst catcher blocking last year, according to this particular metric. That is why they feel him and Salvador Perez can coexist, where Salvi can be the primary catcher still, and Melendez can move over to the corner outfield spots. He's got really good athleticism, very exciting offensive upside. Defensively as a catcher, there's some real questions about exactly how long that is still going to be part of his game, considering the way that he performed in receiving and blocking last year.
Yeah, it's really crazy there. Looking at a former Marlin, also Kike Hernandez there. You have Eddie Rosario. This is definitely one of the strongest. For some people, probably not being one of the favorites. They are favored, but really, it's probably Japan, USA, the DR, and maybe Venezuela going it right there. Yeah. I do believe, looking at Pool D, with Puerto Rico, Venezuela, DR, it looks like it's going to be one of those three coming out of that pool. Who do you guys think is going to be the team that maybe is left out? Not left out, but loses, is not coming out of that group?
Well,
can you repeat that one more time? Sorry,
in this case, you get two of these teams advancing to the quarterfinals, and we assume I think Venezuela is going to be favored over Puerto Rico to make it out behind the DR if it comes down to those two teams. Yeah, we should briefly mention with Venezuela, it's Arraez, Luzardo, and Emmanuel De Jesus representing the Marlins in that one. And their position player core is a lot deeper than Puerto Rico is, including having a 90-year-old Miggy Cabrera. He is still around. He's their captain, and that's the cool part of this is having a captain for every single team. But as you mentioned, it's 3 very good teams, and it's only 2 spots that are going to get out of even the pool stage. I would lean towards Venezuela over Puerto Rico.
Really?
Yeah, if I had to guess.
I think Venezuela has one of the strongest rotations or just overall pitching staff. You have Pablo Martin Perez, who had a really great year last season. You have Ranger Suarez. We mentioned Jesus, Pablo, Eduardo Rodriguez, Luis Garcia. It's really in terms of maybe flexibility that Venezuela has there, along with Jose Alvarado coming out of the bullpen. And, of course, with Marlins like Luis Arias, and I believe I think they could come out. I think Puerto Rico just doesn't really have enough in terms of position players for them to get out of the group. We obviously know Javi Baez, Francisco Lindor, but there's a drop-off there. And I don't think Neftali Soto is really going to be enough to drag them to take them out when you get this team here. Like
we can play the same game we did for the other ones. Who's the weakest position player penciled in for a starting job? I guess David Peralta. But it would be totally shocking if Peralta gets back to being like a league average platoon hitter. That's not the worst thing in the world to have him as a primary starter in the corner outfield spots. And beyond that, to have Acuna and Altuve and Arise and even Jimenez, the way that he broke out last year for Cleveland, this is let me look at historically, Venezuela has never really. They had 1 year in 2009 where they finished 3rd. The other seasons didn't make it particularly deep. So this, you could probably argue, is their most talented team that they've had so far. The only one notable subtraction on the depth side is Miggy Rowe. Miggy Rowe wanted to do this, and if you've been following with the Dodgers losing Gavin Lux for the year, that pushed Miggy Rowe up the depth chart, and that played a role in why he was sticking around, even though he wasn't originally. He wanted to do this tournament so bad, come back to Miami, and he had to change plans because of how much the Dodgers need him to be ready to be potentially their everyday guy this year.
Yeah. Can you scroll up a bit? I want to see some of their position players. Let me see. Yeah. Anthony Santander.
I do want to point out former Marlin Jose Quijada in the bullpen right there.
Former future Marlin Gleyber Torres.
Yep.
Hot minute. Robinson Chirinos. Okay.
You can say the same thing with Anthony Santander.
Yeah.
Perez, Lauriston Giefel, who I believe one of the starters there at the Angels. This is a nice team. I think it's one of the most, I don't want to say underrated because they're obviously full of major league talent and one of the favorites, but in terms of when you look at them compared to Japan, USA, DR, they're not maybe looked upon as the same as them, but I think they're going to come out of the group. I think it's going to be them and DR for sure coming out of Miami.
One thing I wanted to get into before we go was reflecting on this poll that I kind of immediately regretted, where I asked, we got a whole lot of votes. We got about 1,000 votes on this, who are Marlins fans rooting for in the WBC. And what I should have done, as you see, the one option that was far and away the least popular was Venezuela. And I realized immediately that for Miami people, I should have put Cuba in there. It wouldn't have finished higher than the U.S., but it may have, I think just about everybody that had other or don't care, I think just about all of them were pulling for Cuba for understandable reasons. So even though that is a team that doesn't have any current Marlins or really any former Marlins of note on their roster,
Quintana?
He doesn't count. He never played in the majors. He never even made it on the 40-man roster. I'm glad that he made such an impression on people. He made an impression on people last year when he was hitting 300 in AAA. I get it, but we're going to forget about him in the near future. He's getting significant playing time for them. Yeah, that a lot of people are very interested in Cuba, and we'll see. They're not a sure bet to make it out of their pool stage. They were the ones that they opened up with a loss against the Netherlands. So they'll need to play. They have pretty limited margin for error from here on forward in order to at least make it to Miami to play some games at Lone Depot.
Yeah, and I think with that is a perfect time for predictions So for this prediction, we are going to do who is going to win the overall WBC. Let's see.
This is prediction time.
It's time.
And as our guest, Jonathan, you get the first crack, the first dibs. Who is going to win the World Baseball Classic?
I kind of spoke on my favorite earlier. I got to go with Japan on this one. I just think that every ounce of talent that they have out in Japan is absolutely ridiculous. I think they're not going to have any trouble. Maybe with DR, but that pitching's ridiculous.
Okay, Eli, who do you think is going to win the World Baseball Classic?
I'll be a homer and go with Team USA. I think they have enough talent this year. They have the right leadership, so much depth on the position player side, and they really want it. That was not the case when this tournament started. There wasn't a whole lot of people didn't apply stakes to it. The only way that this really works as a whole tournament, as a concept, especially in the US, is if you treat it the way that you put it early in the stream as the World Cup of baseball and something on that level. We're moving more in that direction in the US now than we were in any previous edition of the WBC. So it's going to be a tight one. I would not be surprised in a number of different directions if other teams pulled it out. I think this is the year of the U.S. to get it done again. And dude, repeating 6 years after they previously did it, it doesn't feel like a repeat. But this is the best team that I think they've put forward to date. So it would be a disappointment if they don't get it done.
Yeah. So for me, for my choice, I would love to pick the USA, but I just think the rotation is going to, do them maybe a slight disservice. This World Baseball Classic, but I'm going to go with the Dominican Republic. I think almost everyone's choice, and rightfully so. You have the Cy Young and Sandy. You have Julio Rodriguez. You have Juan Soto. That team is stacked at every position there, and I think they're going to run through it. I think maybe they end. God, it's going to be insane the run they're going to go on. And just looking back at it, and if they do get Vladdy at some point in this WBC, it's going to be a complete game changer. But I think Dominican Republic runs away with it.
Yeah, that would be great for the Marlins, indirectly, if Sandy is hoisting the trophy in his home ballpark.
Let's go.
That's something they're betting on. That's probably the final thing that we should touch on is the Marlins in securing the WBC for themselves. They are making a pretty big they have a lot riding on the fact that people that attend these games for the tournament come back for actual Marlins games at some point during the year. They want people that, for understandable reasons, haven't come to the park because the team stinks every single year, to have a reason to see what they've made tweaks to over the recent years to the fan experience. And we'll see. They get it done. I've been getting panicked emails from the team about little things. They want people to be aware of all the traffic in the area on game days. People arrive early so that people have a good experience. They really want people to have a good experience so they keep coming back. And there's a lot at stake for them. Some of these people, they'll be coming here for the very first time. And as much as the game on the field can kind of give them a positive impression, they're going to be paying attention to the little stuff as well. And that's going to come into play when they think about whether they want to return over the next 4 years before there's another WBC. They want to give these people a reason to be actual loyal, new Marlins fans, or ones that just enjoy the experience. This will be a huge test of it. So that's an angle that I'm going to be following as well.
Yeah, and for sure, be there for those games. Fish Stripes doing a little meetup on the 11th this Saturday for that game there. Sunday, Kevin, Eli are going to be there. If you can't make it there, come join us. Watch Nicaragua versus Israel. Let's cheer on Jock Peterson, Richard Plyer, and all those guys. And before we go, Eli, I think the Marlins just scored in that Israel game. Do we know who did that?
Yeah, after one inning, it's 1-0. Marlins leading against Colton Gordon. It was John Birdie ground rule double, a Jazz bunt single, and then on an error by Ty Kelly, that's what scored the run. An unearned wow, a couple runs in here. So far, just one run. This is a team that I wrote on the site. They're playing terribly so far at this point in spring training. I'm glad we didn't spend too much time talking about it, just because these games don't really count one way or the other. But the biggest thing is offensively. This team has looked so bad to this point in the spring, very similar to last year. It would be a big sigh of relief if by the end of tonight they put up a crooked number with a lot of their starters in this game against the pitching staff that is just getting loosened up and obviously doesn't have the same level of talent that a typical major league organization would have.
Yeah. And I think with that, it's the perfect time to end it. For myself, for Eli, for Jonathan Anderson from 5 Reasons, this has been Fish Stripes Live, and always go fish.